recognized symbol of excellence for your entertainment.
Melody!
Welcome to Machino Music, the show that puts some music in Machino music, with your host, me, Brett Strong. Today on Machino Music, it's a continuation of my 20 favorite heavy metal albums, Part 2, the Top 10. Okay, here we go. Part 2 of my 20 favorite heavy metal albums. This is the Top 10. Part 1 was 20 through 11, and I mean, like I said on part 1, this was extremely difficult. This was a Herculean effort on my part. I mean, I was bashing my head against the wall, especially since I decided to limit it to one album per band, so that made it even harder. I torture myself because it's fun. But yeah, I mean, I could have made this list just like a few bands, and then boom, list would have been done. But I decided to limit one album per band. I also tried to pick albums that mean something to me. Again, these are my favorites. If you don't hear your favorite, that's okay, that's cool. Because these albums mean something to me. Also, if you want to say, oh, that's not metal, you're stupid, you're a poo-poo head, you don't know what you're talking about, that's not... We don't need to get into that debate. Doesn't matter. I mean, we don't need to start these wars over this insignificant stuff because it doesn't prove anything, doesn't solve anything, and we're just here to enjoy the music. And again, these albums mean something to me, and I just I have to include these. So, just wanted to say that. Okay, so before we get started, let's do a recap of 20 through 11. Okay, there's 20 through 11. Now we're in the top 10. And I'm going Iron Maiden, Power Slave. I should also say these are really in no particular order because that'd be too impossible. So I'm not saying these are like better and that these are like the best albums. They're just my favorites. So I'm not really ranking these just because that would, as I said, make it even harder. But, yeah, this is just a great album. I mean, I think this is like a perfect album. It's always my favorite Iron Maiden album. I mean, from Aces High, kicking off the album, to Rime of the Ancient Mariner, closing it out. I mean, every song on this is great. I love the title track. Could be my favorite Iron Maiden tune. But yeah, just love this album. Love the imagery. I love like the Egyptian stuff they were doing at the time. It's really cool. Very itchy. Okay. Next I'm going Dio, Holy Diver. The great Ronnie James Dio. I almost went the last in line. I really like that album too. But this one had to be because I just remember the first time I heard this and just the impact of hearing Stand Up and Shout for the first time. I was like, whoa, what an opener. Title track is great. I mean, really not a bad song on this album. I mean, Rainbow in the Dark was the kind of the hit off of this album. That was the first Dio song I heard, so I really like that. It's like really commercial sounding, but still a really cool tune. But, I mean, sounds different compared to everything else at the album, because this album is just so... It's just a heavy metal classic. I mean, expect nothing less from Dio, Ronnie James Dio, the Dragon Slayer himself, and this is just so good. Had to be on here. Next I'm going Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. Again, another one. First time I heard it, first I heard that title track. It's like, whoa, this sounds so different. Just love this album. Primal Concrete Sledge. How heavy is that song? Cemetery Gates, of course, just awesome. Yeah, The Art of Shredding. I mean, that's a showcase for the great Dimebag Darrell and his guitar playing. Just love it. Love this album. Next, I had to put Led Zeppelin 2. I mean, this is a pioneering heavy metal album. I mean, this is one of those albums that just like everything that came after it. I mean, it's so pioneering, and I did my Led Zeppelin album ranking. This was not my number one. My number one is Physical Graffiti. But this album is the one, like, if you just want to get into Led Zeppelin, this is the album you should listen to. This is like everything the band was. It's like just wrapped up in a ball. Like this, like it's just like the perfect, like, sampler album. I need a sip of water. I'm chewing an ice cube. But, yeah. This is a great, I mean, so many great, Heartbreaker, Moby Dick, Whole Lot of Love. Yeah, just had to have Led Zeppelin too. Next, I have to go Kiss, Creatures of the Night. You can say, oh, what's Kiss doing on this album? This is probably the heaviest Kiss album, at least of the 80s. Because, the heaviest, I guess, the early heavy metal Kiss album would be Hotter Than Hell. But this is my favorite Kiss album, and I really thought about it. I mean, this is just such a statement. This is like Kiss saying, we're going in, like, trying to go in a heavier direction. We kind of have to. And it's Eric Carr, who I think is, like, my favorite rock drummer. So yeah, the title track, great. Keep Me Coming, heavy, love it. War Machine, a heavy tune. I Love It Loud, which is just a sort of a heavy metal statement, a heavy metal proclamation right there. Yeah, I just felt I had to include this album. Next, I'm going to go Megadeth, Euthanasia. Now, I was going to put Rust in Peace. I was going to put Peace Sells. Those are great albums. I was going to put Countdown to Extinction. I really thought about this. But this is my favorite Megadeth album. Really always has been. It just has tunes on it that I just love so much. I had to put it on. Train of Consequences. Love that riff so much. One of my favorite Megadeth tunes. Just love that chugging riff. So good. And also the lyrics are really funny, really clever. Reckoning Day. Love that tune. Kicks off the album. Blood of Heroes is such a great tune. I remember I would just listen to that song over and over and over again. I remember just pushing the button and just listening to that song over and over. It'd be done, I just listened to it again. Just love that tune. So yeah, that's pretty much why I had to There's just a bunch of songs on here that, I mean, I had to include this as one of my favorite metal albums. Yeah. Dig it. Okay, next. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. There's a few Priest albums I could have put. But this one, I mean, I just kept coming back to this one. I mean, this is like the first one that I really heard, really got me into Judas Priest. I think it's like a perfect album. Not a bad song on it. I mean, it's got probably one of their biggest hit. You've Got Another Thing Coming. Great tune. Kind of one of those tunes like I should be tired of, but I'm not. I don't know. I still really like that song. Title track, great. What an opener with the Hellion right into Electric Eye. Yeah. Bloodstone, so good. Yeah. And I really thought about it. This had to be the Judas Priest album. I had a magazine. Actually, there's a picture of it on the community page here. I didn't dig it out for this. But it was all about like 80s metal. It was mostly about like the glam metal and the hair metal, but they had a feature on like the real metal albums. And a lot of the albums that are on this list, part 1 and 2, were from that article. And I remember reading about this, and I'm talking about it, so this is the one I'm talking about. But it's just said this is like an essential. And it's like, really got me back into metal at a time where I, kind of wasn't listening to a whole lot of it. Really got me into like the classic 80s, 90s metal. So, yeah. That magazine, I have that to thank. I don't know where I was going with that. I had a thought in my head. I thought this was important that I would talk about this, and now I kind of forget what I was going to say. But I'm going to continue here. All right. I debated this, but this is the Black Sabbath album I'm going with. I'm going with Heaven and Hell. Now, I would say my favorite Black Sabbath album is Volume 4, and there's so many others that I could say, but I just kept thinking, Heaven and Hell. When I was listening, I mean, just this album is so good. I mean, the opening track, Neon Nights, so awesome. The title track is great, Die Young. Yeah, I just love this album. And also I get to talk about Ronnie James Dio again.
I feel like I'm actually doing my job in here. What is this?
This was the Ronnie James Dio debut in Black Sabbath, and it's just such a great album. When I really thought about it, I gotta have Black Sabbath on here. Dear me, what album do I choose? I could have just, Volume 4, but I just kept coming back to this one, so I had to put Heaven and Hell. Just love it. We're in the top 2, everybody. Okay. Now you might say this is not metal, but I had to include it just from the impact it had on me. Van Halen, Fair Warning. Massive impact on me. I mean, just from the opening of Mean Street, like I'd heard Van Halen 1. I mean, and I just love that album. I mean, what a statement. That was kind of like a rebirth almost of heavy metal. And then it was all disco and all this stuff. So, and Eruption was just groundbreaking. But for me, the opening of Mean Street just impacted me so much more than Eruption. Because Eruption's impressive, but then when I hear what he's doing on the beginning of Mean Street, like tapping the harmonics, I was just like, what is Eddie Van Halen doing now? So, yeah. It's just one of those things. I just couldn't believe that. And that riff is so heavy, so mean, fitting of a song called Mean Street. Sinner's Swing, so good. Unchained, I mean, that's a heavy tune. That's a pretty, I'd say that's a heavy metal song. yeah, I mean, this is not like traditional, you could say, total heavy metal, but there's the moments on it, and I really just had to, it's my favorite Van Halen album. King Edward in tip-top form. Alex Van Halen just is so good. David Lee Roth, I can tolerate on this album. There's times where I can't stand David Lee Roth. But she doesn't do that. She's doing that scatty stuff. I can't stand that. I mean, he's a great vocalist. I'm putting down David Lee Roth. And I'm not saying I'm, a Van Hagar guy. I like Sammy Hagar too. But there's just times where David Lee Roth can kind of just kind of really bothers me with the scatty stuff. Doesn't really do that on here. He behaves himself. He cools it on the showboaty, scatty, hey, look at me, I'm singing like Al Jolson stuff. I don't like that. But cools it on here, and it's just I just love this. I had to include this. And it's in the number 2 spot. But what's in the number 1 spot? I gotta go Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. This was the album that really got me back into heavy metal. This is just, I mean, the first time I heard I Don't Know, that opening track, just like, whoa, this is awesome. And actually, let me get serious here. My uncle, who introduced me to this album, it's a cassette that had Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, which also could have been on here, but this was the first one I heard. It was a cassette with those 2 albums. He recently passed away, so I guess you can say it's almost like a little tribute that I have this at my number 1, because without my Uncle John, I may not have ever heard this album. He just gave me the tape out of his car and said, okay. So I started playing guitar. I was like in guitar lessons at the time. I wanted to hear, I want to hear some of this stuff. Like, what is this stuff you listen to? Like, I want to hear some of this. And he was just like, well, here's an Ozzy Osbourne tape. And he gave me a Rush tape, and also so I was, really got into Rush at the same time too. But this Ozzy, this just hit me. This was the first one I listened to, and yeah, it just. I mean, Randy Rhoads guitar playing. What can you say about Randy Rhoads guitar playing? Phenomenal. He was one of those guys. So, yeah. This had to be number 1 when I really thought about it. I mean, really not a bad song on here. Kind of do without No Bone Movies. Kind of silly, but, still a fun song, I guess, for what it is. But yeah, I mean, this is just such a good album. Ozzy Osbourne, first solo record, and yeah, love it. And I have my uncle to thank for that, and actually for getting me into a lot of this stuff. So there you go, my top 10 of my 20 favorite heavy metal albums. Again, these albums mean something to me. You may not agree with it. That's okay. These are my favorites. Sure, you have your own favorites. We're not here to start a debate and who's right and who's wrong and all this. We're just like, here, let's enjoy the music. And I love these albums. And if you're a fan of these albums and you're a metalhead, I hope you enjoyed this. That's it for this week. Until we meet again, this is Brett Strong saying good journey.